Monica Genya is Director of Association of Doctors Without Borders Southern Africa. She joins us now to discuss the situation in Palestine. A very good evening to you and thank you so much for speaking to us. So Doctors Without Borders is warning that the ongoing heavy fighting and bombing in Khan Yunis has led to vital medical services collapsing at Nasser Hospital. So tell us a little bit more about the situation at the moment.
Thank you very much for having me. And what we can say is what we've been seeing over the last 3 months, and the situation is getting worse and worse every day. We've seen and we've denounced a devastating level of suffering amongst the civilian populations in Gaza, numerous attacks on healthcare and medical staff, the displacements of millions of people from the north to the south, where civilians continue to be bombed, and the severe limitation in access to basic commodities such as food and water has been inflicted on the population of the Gaza Strip in the frame of a complete siege imposed in the first weeks of the war. So this situation continues, and MSF continues to call for an immediate ceasefire and to allow humanitarian aid to flow into the region.
Obviously, this is important information to know and share, especially against the backdrop of the outcome of the ICJ hearing and trial. So tell us, you're talking about diminished capacity, but I believe most importantly that the hospital's surgical unit is now almost non-existent as well. What kind of complications is this presenting for you?
It's almost impossible to bring proper medical care to our patients. We are not able to get anesthetics, for example, in order to perform surgery. So that's being performed without any anesthesia. We're not able to give the kind of care that we need to give to our patients. We have seen some humanitarian aid come into the region and into the hospital, but it's just a trickle in the face of what we need to be able to provide.
So just according to your report, and you can correct me if I'm wrong in terms of the figures that you say, between 300 and 350 patients remain at Nasser Hospital because they're unable to evacuate. Tell us a little bit more about the situation.
Yes, at the moment there is nowhere that we can say they would be safe in going. So they're unable to evacuate, unable to move. Our staff are with them, but at the moment there's nowhere where they can go where they would be safe. So they're stranded, they're stuck with little to no medical supplies at the moment. The situation is very dire.
And the kind of injuries that you're talking about, I'd imagine that a lot of them are near fatal given the continued bombardment and, as you say, the lack of medical resources. Are you just able to share with us what the typical injuries you're dealing with at the moment?
Yes, we're looking at a lot of the sort of injuries you'd expect from war wounded. It's very difficult to treat without our medical supplies and without humanitarian aid being allowed to reach. Even basic humanitarian aid like food and water is severely restricted. So the situation is almost impossible.
And what about staffing complement? Is that something that is available to you in general, or is that just the emergency room that is lacking?
We do have staff members, local staff members and international staff members who manage to access the area, the region, the hospital, but nowhere near the staff complement that is needed. And this also has been as a result of the severe restrictions in allowing humanitarian aid and humanitarian aid workers to reach the population.
And what about European Gaza Hospital? Is that an additional resource available to you? And if you can just compare by size the facility, in comparison with Nasser Hospital, and where is it situated in terms of geography in Gaza?
What I can say is at the moment, almost every hospital is facing the same problem: lack of supplies, lack of staff. They're not safe at all. It's not a safe space the way it should be. Yes, it might be bigger in comparison, but it's still facing the same restrictions that Nasser Hospital is facing. All the hospitals, all the medical facilities are under bombardment, constant bombardment, and lack supplies and lack staff.
One of the things that South Africa's foreign minister or international relations minister mentioned following the outcome of the ICJ ruling was that by its very nature, what the ICJ is asking Israel to do is that it has to stop hostilities, the bombardment, in order to deliver aid. Hospitals, by their very nature, need to be protected spaces. Since this latest conflict began, how has it been? Have medical workers been able not only access to the medical centers, but to be able to provide medical care?
No, absolutely not. Since the beginning of this latest conflict, the situation started off quite bad and then deteriorated into an impossible situation. We have seen very restricted amounts of humanitarian aid being permitted to come through, and is nowhere near what is needed. We have been calling for a ceasefire for the past 3 months. MSF has been calling for an immediate, urgent ceasefire so that we can bring medical and humanitarian aid into the region, because it is sorely needed.
Is there a likelihood of a sustained ceasefire that can stop the loss of lives of civilians, or even to enable the flow of humanitarian assistance? Just from where you sit, what you're hearing, do you think you'll get vital supplies anytime soon?
If the situation continues the way it is at the moment, it doesn't look like it, but we continue to urgently call for a ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire, a sustained ceasefire, so that we are able to reach our patients and we are able to bring medical and humanitarian supplies to the region very urgently.